Glad to be here. I've been coming to this conference since 2019 and always great to be here. Now I realize I need to update my picture. I've got a lot more gray now. Anyway, well, I work as Senior Director of Process Excellence and Intelligent Automation at CISIV. CISIV does background screenings, and I've been at the organization just over 2 years. But throughout my 20-year career, I've mostly, I started out in Lean Six Sigma, then graduated towards digital transformation and intelligent automation. So to Dan's question about, how do we define a self-optimizing enterprise, right? So a self-optimizing enterprise doesn't just automate tasks. It also learns, it continuously senses what is, all the operational processes. It adapts the execution accordingly, and it provides a continuous feedback loop to learn. So think of it as, reinforcement learning applied at an enterprise level, but with very strict guardrails. Thank you. That's why I'll pass it over to Puneet.
Thank you, Ashu. I'm not a veteran like Ashu. This is my first year. So hello, everyone. I'm a senior program manager at Google. I lead their finance solution and transformation team. So basically, we have a team of business process engineers. I know a lot of you talked about business process management. So that is what they do. We have program managers that manage programs over, multi-billion-dollar cost base for, all the end-to-end workflows. And then before Google, I was at Western Digital, where we were merging 3 Fortune 500 companies. So we had 4 different ERPs running at one point in time. So my perspective that I'm sharing with you today, it's coming from, managing multi-billion-dollar cost base. Now, going back to the definition, right? I think of self-optimizing enterprise as, self-healing system, right? And there's a framework that we kind of use. And this framework has, 3 different agentic components to it, right? So as we all know, right, all the transformation projects start with, discovering your processes. So that would be your Scout agentic AI, which would discover the processes, right? How it is happening within the system. Then comes the guardrail, right? As we implement these agents rather than, like humans doing the work, right? They would be scouting the processes, discovering how the processes would work. And then for that, you would need guardrails, right? So guardrails would keep your execution safe. And then third one is Sentinel, right? Once we define all these, we need to make sure that, it is more of a self-healing process, right? Not just an optimization that we need to do. So yeah, I'll conclude with that.
Lovely. And I'll briefly introduce myself. I lead applied AI at Skan AI. We're a process intelligence solution that works from direct screen observation and uses that to map processes that enable companies ultimately to benchmark their operations, to do business transformation, and then ultimately to also automate their core workflows. And the one thing I actually wanted to mention around kind of self-optimization that we believe, as we've seen companies now go from process mapping and understanding to automation, and then not yet to kind of self-optimization, but in the future to self-optimization, process redesign, et cetera, really based off of those insights. There's like a real danger that companies go towards like more sameness and less differentiation. That the focus really gets stuck on, how can we be as simple as possible? How can we streamline as much as possible? How can we take as much cost out, et cetera? And while there's like certainly opportunity to be streamlined and to take cost out, and I think there will be a lot of that in the future, there's a reason for why there's more than one company in every industry. And it's because each of these companies has a perspective on how to go to market. They have a customer base that they've chosen to reflect their preferences. They have a perspective on how to compete that is unique to that business. And so when I think about self-optimization, yes, you want to kind of you want to streamline, you want to automate, et cetera, but also you really want to identify what is unique about your business, what's unique about your process that's actually important and that's there for a reason, and how do you expose that to the LLMs that are going to tell your company how to operate, so that ultimately you maintain that uniqueness as you go to market. So that's something that we think very deeply about, and I think is something worth considering. So the first question I wanted to pose to the panelists here is about AI. Ashutosh, you've been coming from 2019, and I guess that's like pre LLM being everywhere days. But with the advancements in AI, love to hear your take on how AI is really advancing what we can do with process mapping and with transformation of workflows.
Absolutely, great question, Dan. And so, I initially started using process maps as a way of just understanding your current state processes. And the presentation we had before us on business process architecture also talked about mapping current state, which was exactly what we need to do. And those back in 10 years ago, we were using MS Visio, storing process maps, drawing process maps and storing them on SharePoints or on individual desktops. And from there, we have come a long way, right? Process mining has evolved considerably. Today, we have many vendors we have at this conference, including Skan AI, which not just does process mining, but process intelligence as well. And what that really means is when we are coupling AI with process mining, we don't need to have someone sit and manually draw out those processes anymore. We are able to detect processes real time. And anytime there is a drift from the designed process, it throws out an exception as well. So AI is really showing you the actual telemetry of work, of what is happening on the ground, not just someone's viewpoint of what they think a process is like, right? So we don't even want someone sitting and asking someone questions. Show me what you do, right? Show me your day-to-day and someone mapping it down. Now we have agents sitting on users' desktops, which are actively monitoring every step that is taken. And not only that, with AI and process mapping together, we are now able to track that process across different users, different departments. So we can stitch a process end to end as it passes through different parties in the process, right? If we have 10 different users in a process, we are able to map that end-to-end process in real time. I think that's been the game changer. And for any transformation that we are embarking on, it's very important that we have the true picture of the process. And that's where AI is really playing a big role today. Puneet, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think you said all the right things, right? Working in a big organization, what happens is anytime you start a transformation, it always starts with process first, right? You need to know how your current state is, right? Like, before even you start a transformation, you have to go to your leadership, create a business case, whether it's worth pursuing that transformation, right? So that's where you would know, okay, if I do this, it's going to cost me X amount of dollars and it is going to give me Y return, right? So you always start with your business case, right? Why? Then, the process element. You try to map your current state, right? How your current state processes are set up, how your data architecture is there, right? Like, how it is happening from, one system to another, and then like, the technology layer on top of it, right? So when you are kind of mapping the processes, we use this APQC framework where we have L0 to L4 process taxonomy, L0 being the highest level of value chain, how a CFO would see the function top down, like, you have your financial planning and analysis, you have reporting, you have tax, etc. And then L4 is the DTP level, which is desktop procedures, how an analyst would be doing a job. So going back to Ashutosh's point, right? Like, we need to map this process, and like, we are using all these agentic frameworks today. Previously, we had an army of business process re-engineers who literally had to work with the business to capture the current state, right? Because as we know, once we are done with the transformation, these processes will go stale, right? And if there are no global process owners assigned to those processes, then the process would just sit in somewhere, and we have to start from scratch. So basically, the Scout, agentic mechanism that I mentioned, right? The framework, how it would work is like, it will, because when human is narrating a process, right? I mean, there would be some shadow process that would be sitting outside of their execution, and they would miss it, right? I mean, it would be there in their muscle memory because, they are now used to it. But when they are narrating the story, they might forget to share it with you. So like, similar to how Skan AI or Clarity AI does, right? They scout the processes, right? So, you run their application in the background. Similarly, we have created something on Gemini agents. We use the same framework, right? It will discover your process, right? I mean, now the teams will sit in a meeting room, talk to the agent, and like, get things done. And even beyond that, there are certain things happening in the system itself, right? So you need to scan all the logs, all the transactions, how it is happening in the system. So it maps everything, right? And then, I've seen this example played out in my past integration where like, we thought 80% of the procurement was digital and only 20% was happening outside. But what happened is like, there was still a journal entry or reclass entry happening in month end close. Once we did the process mapping of current state and we went to future state, we realized there was this master data which was incorrectly coding the tax rate, right? And because of that, that entry still had to be done manually, right? So you need to make sure that like, all the transaction logs, all the system implication, all the human actions, like, how they're executing the process end to end is captured. And that is the only way, the self-healing mechanism for a process would work in future.
It might be at the risk of being biased. I will say that what we've observed in the last year become possible is with both the advent of LLMs, but also the fact that really in the last year they've become usable far more because of cost, latency, and quality improvements. You can now, with good process observation, you can now get to much better understanding of unstructured actions in data, as well as at judgment and intent capture, right? Which were both very traditionally challenging to get from ML-based solutions. And so you can now, as you guys mentioned, observe a process and really understand not only what the process steps are, but why the process steps are and what is happening and what's the intent and the judgment behind each of the actions. And you cannot yet do that. You cannot measure like that level of intent and judgment yet in real time at tens of thousands of operators. That does break the cost and latency equation. But in the next year, you probably, or maybe at max 2, you probably will be able to, with cost and latency expected to continue to probably improve 5 to 10x each year in the next 10 years. And so what I would urge folks to consider is knowing that the capability is there. Those companies that invest in process observation, and it can be with Skan or with others. There's a variety of companies that do it. I think will reap very significant benefits as you can process more and more of that data with deeper and deeper insights at a cost and at a latency that becomes actually really truly impressive with what you can do. Speaking of what's possible when. There's some kind of consider a trade-off between speed and quality, and I'd love to hear how you guys manage that.
Yeah. So speed and quality in terms of getting to a self-optimizing enterprise is there's a very delicate balance, I would say, right? And I was in a presentation earlier this morning, and the person talked about whenever you're going through a AI deployment program, you should start with crawl, walk, and then run, which is exactly what I was thinking about of how you want to deploy an AI solution. You want to start really, really small, and it could be a small POC which impacts maybe a small department, maybe 4 or 5 people even. It doesn't matter, because you need to prove out that it works first of all, and the guardrails that you need to establish on any AI program are, you have to be really careful. Different industries have different compliance, regulatory, and legal requirements. You have to make sure that you are conforming to all of them. So it's paramount that you establish those guardrails and do a small POC, make it succeed, and then gradually expand. So I would say start slow, really slow. take one step back before you can take two steps forward. And that's when you could then, you could have your threshold set, you could have a human in the loop design. I mean, you should have a human in the loop design and have threshold set for what level of accuracy, if my ML model is confident about, at what level will I accept this result? At what level will I bring a human in the loop? So start very, very slow, and even if the speed is slow, that's fine. But once you have established and proven out a small proof of concept, then you can gradually scale up.
Yeah, I think I have a slightly different viewpoint to this because, as you think about AI, right? Like, last year we were dealing with generative AI. It is more probabilistic, right? You ask a question, it gives you answer, it increases your productivity, and it gives you answers super fast, right? But if you think about finance, I mean, like, talking from finance perspective, finance is more deterministic, right? It is rigid. You're dealing with numbers. Like even 1% here and there could, like, break your SOX code, and your control, like your auditors would, reach out, hey, why is this happening, right? So you cannot use something which is, probabilistic. You need something deterministic, and that's why we would need to have agentic guardrails, right? Like Ashu said, right? The way agentic guardrails would work is, you should think of this as policy as a code. So to give you an example, right? Now some of the workflows, right, they need to happen, like, they can happen at a lightning fast speed, right? To give you an example, right? If we are taking procure to pay, for example, right? We are doing this three-way invoice match, right? There was this phony vendor which sent millions of dollars of invoices to Google and Meta, and they paid it without realizing that, they are paying to a phony company, or like, person who is a scam. So how do you stop that, right? I mean, we paid millions without realizing, because like we receive millions of invoices every day, and our human workforce isn't enough to, do a three-way match, right? So our revenue is leaking there. So how do we stop that? So what you do is, like, if it's a preferred supplier, right? If it's a preferred vendor, so, it will do an automatic check. So if the match is correct, then AI should, like, take care of 90% of the workflows without stopping them, right? And then only for the 10% workflows where, like, you would have a supplier which is new, right? Which you don't have seen so many invoices, right? In those exception scenario, or if a dollar value amount is higher, right? Like, in those 10% of the scenarios, you would route it to human in the loop, right? Only 10%, right? You can have 90% of the process automate fast doing with the agent, but that 10% is where the meat of your matter is. And that is where you would realize, okay, like, what kind of exceptions am I approving? So your role shift from operator to, like, designing the logic, right? Like, how is AI going to determine when to reroute that exception to a human, right? So that is the way you would balance them. And I would say, you don't need to engineer this, right? You cannot just balance them, speed versus quality, but you need to engineer it, because we all know that, tomorrow a job of an analyst is not going to be like, approve that approve that PO, or, like, book that accrual. They would be designing the logic, right? How the agents would be executing certain parts of the process, right? So think of all these use cases within your organization which can be improved faster, and then bring appropriate guardrails where you think that, okay, this is where things can go wrong, and that's where you can have the agentic guardrail built in.
Yeah, I agree, and I sometimes think of this like trade-off as like not really a trade-off. Like you're never going to trade off quality. Like the answer is more, how can you go as fast as you can with quality, right? And I like to think actually self-driving cars are like a pretty good analogy, right? Some of us live in the Bay, and we have a good deal of self-driving cars, and the tolerance for issues with self-driving cars is far lower than the tolerance for human drivers, and that's how it should be. And so that's, I think, very much the approach. I think when I think about speed and quality, I think a lot about how do you measure quality and evaluations. And I think evaluations are a forcing function that often people think, okay, I've done the thing, now at the end, how am I going to evaluate it, right? And that's, I think, completely the opposite way that you should be looking at it. The work that it takes to design evaluations is actually the same work that it takes to do, whether it's the automation or the process mapping. It is fundamentally it's fundamentally the same work. And so if you think from evaluation backwards, I think that's how you both can hit quality and move faster. And then I would also think, kind of going back to the self-driving car thing, it's wrong to set your evaluations just to measure car accidents, right? Once you've gotten to the car accident, you're way beyond, you're way beyond what you should have caught. You should have caught it, you should have caught the sort of leading indicators that are going to lead you to a car crash far sooner. And so, really doing the hard work to think about, well, how am I going to tell if this thing is working correctly? How am I going to tell that it's like following the traffic signs? How am I going to tell that we're not getting any close calls, et cetera, so that we don't actually get to a car accident? If you do that work up front, then that enables you to run really, really fast. Sounds like, Puneet, you want to... Yeah.
So another example
Wait,
on the
your company has self-driving cars. Yeah.
Yeah, so Google owns Waymo, right? And the reason I wanted to bring this example, thanks Dan for reminding, as you all know, right, Waymo has this self-driving technology, right? But even though if it commits mistake, right, we have some human operators sitting. So if enforcement would stop the car, right, they cannot talk to the self-driving car, right? There is a human in the loop component, right? So they are talking to someone that, hey, Waymo is going in the wrong lane because of X, Y, and Z reason. And if they receive a citation, the officer needs to talk to someone, right? So, it will call to an operator and the call would be rerouted. Another example, you have all seen Tesla robotaxis, right? They are trying to go live right now. But before they were going live, they had someone sitting in the front seat with a kill switch, right? That kill switch is something which is 10% exception, right? So until you trust the technology at 100% there, you would still have some component where you would want to monitor. And I mean, people are now embracing AI, right? Sitting in a car is far more dangerous, right? You can get killed in the accident. So people are embracing AI, right? That is the best use case I've seen. So why not in enterprises, right? Why not we have agentic AI as our hybrid workforce?
Yeah. And look, maybe to that point, so what are all so once we get to the self-optimizing enterprise and we've got automations, what are the humans going to do? Maybe Ashutosh, you can kind of share your thoughts.
Yeah, great question. So throughout my career where I've started deploying digital transformation, RP and all, I've always said one thing, which is automation or AI is here to take the robot out of the humans. We want to free up humans for more cognitive tasks, judgment-based tasks. We want them to set the guardrails. We want them to graduate from being analysts in the process to being designers of the workflows, to being the people who catch those exceptions and design what should happen once an exception happens. We don't want to eliminate humans. We want to elevate humans. And the best way to redeploy that effort is, processing more volume and leveraging, those human skills to actually do what humans do best. And we don't want humans to just, copy paste from, one Excel file or to another Excel or, that happens a lot. I'm sure all of us have done it at some point in our lives. We don't want to do that anymore. So we want to do what we are designed for best.
Yeah, so I talked to a lot of university professors who are in the field of finance, and they ask me, right, what are you looking for in the next analyst that you would hire, right? How should I rethink the courses and design stuff, right? Because if there is no analyst level job, what are the people going to do in finance, right? Business finance who are taking business finance one-on-one. So I think about this, our role would shift because, AI is far great at doing analysis, scouting and everything, right? You don't need an analyst to review that, but still the business partnering aspect, right? Sharing the financials to your business partner and telling, hey, where are you spending your money wrong, right? So that human component would still be there, right? Partnership. I don't see people trusting AI with that, agentic AI with that. And, our role would shift from, being a human in the loop to human on the loop, right? You will be defining what guardrails you're setting up to the agentic AI, right? What are your execution rules? What is the logic design? How are you supposed to handle a particular scenario when you are encountered with X, Y, and Z problem, right? So our role would be more of a, designing the AI, like, providing the subject matter expertise to AI and then monitoring it, right? So, like in a self-optimizing enterprise, even there would be agents to monitor the agents, right? And then because we have complex web of first party and third party applications, right? In finance or business, we have to think about agent to agent protocol, right? How would the agent communicate from first party tool to third party tool, right? And how are they handling of the processes? So that would be the role of human, right? We would be reviewing that logic, how the transfer from step A to step B, from agent A to agent B, right? We all use first party tools and we have third party ERP. So how that transition happens and how we design it is going to be the future for humans.
Love it. Look, we've got 5 minutes left. There's one or two more topics we could talk about, but maybe I'll just open it up if there's a number of questions. Yeah. If not, I'll.
I think the question is, when is lunch served?
Yeah, go ahead.
We do a lot of government work, and so a lot of on the tech side of the house, a lot of my roadblocks are actually access to tools and solutions because of the unknown. Yep. So with that, we have the term that we talk about a lot is that Gov Cloud enabled. Is it authorized to be used for government use cases? And so where do you guys see that going, and how can we expect that environment to change? Because I think that we're lagging behind the rest of the world in that by a couple of years.
And can I make sure I understand? So I'm sorry, explain one more time. You have, there's applications that cannot be accessed?
There's a lot of applications that we have that have to be the work and the tool itself, the software itself has to be done in an environment where we know that the information won't go out. So we're in these Gov Cloud environments, and we're pushing towards HTML. We're getting off of these local servers. We're moving on to Google. We're moving into Amazon, those kind of things. So how do you guys see that government sector kind of evolving with this?
Yeah, I can take that. So we have a public sector arm which specifically work with governments and other agencies which have more regulated data. So think of this, right? I mean, even when you think about inter-country, right? Like there was this concept which was talked at Davos meeting recently about the sovereign cloud, right? You need to have a cloud which is more private cloud to yourself. That is where you keep your data, right? And then you can have API integrations layer with Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, etc., right? So that is the way, you can do the inferencing of the data to your, internal data and still keep your data private in your sovereign cloud. So I think that is going to be the concept that is going to be evaluated, because there are a lot of regulated industries like yourself, like, healthcare industry, insurance industry, financial services industry for that matter, right? So they need to keep their data private because, even if you go out of state and if you are working for a healthcare company, they may not give you access to the data. So that is why you need to create those sovereign clouds, and then I can put you in touch with our Google public sector, how our offerings are and how do we provide that customizations to you. So happy to put you in touch.
I will echo that, and I think it doesn't just go for government. There might be regulatory reasons in government, but there's competitive reasons to really treat your data, your enterprise data, as the crown jewels, right? As we can capture more and more signals and telemetry from everybody's business and process it, ultimately the identity of your business goes online, and it's critical to protect that, because that fundamentally it includes exactly that's your competitive advantage, and you don't want to leak that, right? And so whether it's working with a secure cloud like Google, or whether you're self-hosting or what have you, really thinking through where you store that telemetry. Now you don't want to stop work. You want to continue moving forward, but thinking through how you store that securely is a critical thing for government or for enterprise. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
I have a question about the process mapping tools and how you deal with the
Faster, Kathy.
It's a large room, yeah.
Thank you. Question about the process mapping tools and how you deal with the Big Brother aspect of it. I'm sure that's a question you've heard multiple times, but especially when you like to do continuous monitoring after any sort of transformation initiatives have been implemented, and you'd like to monitor how they're doing, in real life and like normal work. I'm curious how you deal with that.
Dan, I know you will have a perspective on this, obviously.
We definitely do. Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll start it off and then I'll let you answer as well. And I've implemented process mining tools for the last 5 years in my last 2 organizations. And so this was one question that came up, right? We had a business unit that was about 1,500 employees, and we wanted to implement process mining, right? And the question was, how are people going to react to it? Like you said, Big Brother is watching us, right? So what we did was we introduced the tool gradually, right? We said, we created a whole change management plan around it. We had a town hall conducted by the head of the department where we introduced the tool, and we positioned it as something that is going to help the employees, right? We said we are not going to use this to track your performance. This is only to track the process, not the people. And we showed a demo of the process. We implemented it in small batches of people, right? And after a couple of months, we shared the results again on the next town hall. And we showed them the actual dashboards from the process mining tool. And we showed that how it was helping us design better processes. And that really helped us in that change management aspect and implementing, getting past the Big Brother question.
Yeah.
Dan?
No, that's it. I mean, that's exactly right. And that's, I think on the one hand, I would say for most folks who work in a heavy process environment, I think there's now largely an expectation that there is you're being tracked by one tool or another. But going beyond that, I think it's exactly what you said, which is it's how you use it and how you communicate it. And the idea here is not to use the tools as a gotcha tool, right? There's very little value in using the tools that way, right? You can pick off maybe 1 or 2 individuals that whatever they were on Netflix instead of doing their job. Like, great, like you saved, $100,000. Like, that's not why you're doing this. You're doing this fundamentally because you want to understand and transform your process. You want to automate at greater scale, et cetera. And so when you use the tool in the right way, and when you describe it that way, usually you can get very, very good buy-in, and we don't see issues. Yeah, I think we'll have to close off the panel. Yeah, let's get lunch. Yeah.
To our panel,
Thanks,
it's
everyone.
tough to be the last one before lunch.